Dave, what do you think the original main event for WrestleMania 5 would have been if they stuck with their plan at WrestleMania 4 to crown Ted DiBiase as champ?
Oh, it was Hogan DiBiase. I can tell you that. I knew that, yeah.
Now, with Ted DiBiase, is this sort of a thing where we'll get to you, Ted? You know, we think you're capable of holding the belt, but there's been a change in plans? Or was the sense at the time that DiBiase was never going to get the title again?
I don't think it was ever that he's never going to get it, but I also don't believe, because I never heard it said to him, and he's talked about it, I don't believe that when they changed their plan that they went to him and go, Ted, you're going to get it later. I don't think they ever made that promise. It was just like, well, we're changing our plans, and that's that. I mean, he could have got it later. I mean, he was a great wrestler, but it just never materialized that way. And it was still the Hogan era. I mean, they weren't really looking at, I thought when it comes to WrestleMania 5, and I thought this then, and I still believe it, I'm even more strongly now, I believe Hulk Hogan should not have won that match. There was so much money, and they still did money in Hogan Savage rematches. But that, I know that the feeling now, if I say this, it's going to sound like, oh my God, you're suggesting a DQ, in WrestleMania. It's freaking horrible. But in those days, it wouldn't have been horrible. I think they should have done a DQ and gone for 3 months of rematches with Hogan challenging Randy at all the house shows, and Randy escaping by the skin of his teeth, and then building to like a cage match down the line, and not a year later, that would have been too long, but maybe 4 months down the line, because I just felt that, again, house show business was so important then, and I believe that a Randy Savage heel defending against Hulk Hogan, as hot as that program was, I think would have sold out. I think it would have been the greatest house show program that the company ever had in its history, would have ever had, even up to now. And I think that by having Hogan win the first match of the series, I think that they took the edge off. I think there was more money in Hogan chasing than Hogan defending.
What made Savage Hogan such a successful program?
Was well planned out for the whole year for the most part, and dynamic personalities. Elizabeth was a big part of it. I mean, Randy, he was great. He was just great. I mean, it's funny because with Hogan, one of the things with Hogan that Vince had was, and it was a qualm that everybody had, was, God, he's so big. I mean, you see him now and you don't understand. He's lost so many inches in height and everything. But I mean, this guy was so big, and he towered over everyone except for, John Studd or Andre or Mulligan, But I mean, the thing is he was much bigger than everyone. So you really needed big challengers. That's why, Hogan did his best business with Kamala and One Man Gang and people like that. Not, Big Boss Man was another one he did great business. He did business with Orndorff, because Orndorff who wasn't very tall, but Orndorff was very believable, and Randy was too. Randy was a guy who, people thought he was off and people thought he was dangerous, and he played the role well. And it was like, yeah, he's small, but he was scary, and people believed he was scary, and it was, and they knew that he was crazy when it came to Elizabeth, which he was in real life. So it wasn't like they created some storyline there. I mean, it was it was an exaggeration of the real Randy Savage. So it just clicked. Yeah, I mean, I remember, and that was also a head-to-head thing, because on that night they had the Flair Steamboat match from New Orleans head-to-head, which was actually the best match of that day as well, by far. That was actually one of the great matches of that era.
Certainly, 60 minutes, if I'm not mistaken.
56 minutes. I mean, the original plan was to go 60, and then they decided about a week, just a few days out, because they were going to do a 60-minute match with Flair and Steamboat to go to a draw, with the idea that there's nothing that WrestleMania can do that could touch that, and there was nothing. And then the decision was made, you know what? We're going to have Steamboat win in 56 minutes, because nobody's going to see that coming. Once they go to about 45 minutes, everyone knows we're going 60, and then we're going to do a finish. So that was the idea that when they switched, because that's when they switched bookers, because George Scott was the original booker when it was a 60-minute draw, and then George Scott got fired because he didn't promote it. Mm-hmm. So Rick became the booker. There's a committee, but Rick was the head of the committee, and then Rick, knowing Rick, of course, like Rick is the opposite of everybody else. Every other booker is going to go, let's change it. Let me win the title now. Rick's thing is like, now that I'm Booker, I'm going to have Steamboat pin me in 56
Right.
minutes, instead of going, it's like, he could have said, I'll have him pin me in 40 minutes. It still would be great, right? No, I'm going to go, like, we're going to go 56 minutes before Steamboat pins me and it was 2 out of 3 fall match. So before Steamboat pins me in the third fall.
Wow. Dave, is Randy Savage Hulk Hogan's greatest opponent?
Like the most famous is Andre, but yes. I mean, I would say if you're going to go with Hogan's greatest opponent, it's the two ones that I would say would be Savage and Orndorff. Orndorff did the best house show business, but Savage did the best WrestleMania business. Orndorff never got a WrestleMania match. So I would say because of that, I would say Savage would be his best opponent, yeah.
Is there anything stand out about the business WrestleMania 5 did? We've touched on it earlier, but just lay it out for us. Why was WrestleMania 5 such an exceptionally successful show?
The main event. Nothing more. It wasn't like the business was any hotter than any other time, but business was good. I mean, I remember going to WWE house shows and they were, when Hogan was there, it was pretty good. I went to one in Chicago with Hogan and Savage. Savage was defending against Bad News Brown, and Hogan wrestled Boss Man in a cage, and it was pretty electric. And Savage, this is after Savage had done his turn, but they would already pre-advertise the Bad News Brown, so it was a heel thing. So the crowd was really weird on Savage, because he was like technically still the baby face, but he'd already turned heel. So but that was the night where it was like, man, it was so electric for Savage against Bad News Brown. There was so much heat in that match, where it was like, God, they can't take the title off him. He is so hot. That was when I came to the conclusion. It was in the building in Chicago that night, where it was just like, Hogan shouldn't beat him in the first meeting. Absolutely not. No, I mean, Hogan was over like crazy, don't get me wrong, but Hogan was going to be over like crazy whether he won or not. And Hogan winning on a DQ or double count out or outside interference or whatever, however you want to do the non-finish, Hogan was still going to be over. And you could tell, like, the Savage's ability to get that crowd to turn on him after he beat Bad News, and they were mostly cheering him because he was the babyface. He did the celebration, and then he just changed his face, and all of a sudden it was like everyone reacted to that changed face, and it's like, man, this guy as a heel, it's like he was a babyface for the whole match. He beat he beat a heel, and he just turned his face. Hogan didn't come out. There was no confrontation. He didn't, do anything to Elizabeth. He just changed his face, and just the way the people reacted was like, this guy, God, this guy's going to be stronger as a heel this run than he was the first run, and much, much stronger. And it's like, he should be world champion. But they didn't do it that way.
Of course, this was the second consecutive WrestleMania at Trump Plaza, and then they stopped. They'd go to Toronto in the Sky Dome the next year. What was the story about why they wanted to do it 2 years in a row, Dave, and why they never did it again?
Trump Plaza?
Yeah.
I think that the heat was so terrible at both shows.
Yep.
And they got, from a critical standpoint, they got killed 2 years in a row by WCW. WCW had the better show both years. And I think that they just wanted to be in a building where the show would look good. So they went to Toronto, which was a hot city for them anyway, and they a city that they could expect to do a sellout. They did over 60,000 people. It was a freaking hot crowd for the most part. So I think that was the key.